Hey guys, how's it going? Just want to give a quick introduction slash overview of what we're trying to do with this Fruit of the Spirit series. This is only my second class in this series, and I know that not too many people could make the first class. So, just real quick overview of what I'm trying to do with this Fruit of the Spirit series, which is in Galatians 5, Paul is kind of contrasting the acts of the flesh versus the fruits of the spirit, and basically saying like the world wants you to live versus the way that you will live if you're following God. And the acts of the flesh, it says, are obvious things like sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, all this list of these things that will show up in our lives if we're not following God. But the fruit of the Spirit, this metaphor of fruit is used a lot in Scripture, and it's basically what it's trying to illustrate. What the metaphor means is these are the things that show up in your life. Like if you are tending an apple tree, its fruit are apples, right? It's what you get out of the tree. And so the fruit of us walking by the Spirit, of following God, and this is Galatians 5:22. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So what I want to do is take each one of those 9 things and give 2 or maybe 3, depending on how big of how many lessons can be drawn from it, and just say, what is this supposed to look like in our lives? It's easy to say that, like, oh yeah, love is supposed to be a fruit in our lives from following God. Joy, peace, patience, kindness, these type of things. But it's easy to say that in a broad sense, but to get into the specifics and say, what does it look like when love is a fruit in our lives? If we're following God and love starts to appear in our lives, starts to grow, what does that look like? And so the first class we did, I did a lesson on loving our enemies, because we know Jesus calls us to love not just the people that are easy to love, but even those who might be opposed to us, even our enemies. But today I kind of want to take a broader stance, and I want to kind of do this question of what does it mean to love, or how should love show up in our lives. I want to take us over to Matthew chapter 22. And excuse me if it doesn't look like I'm looking at you guys. I'm looking at my laptop screen here because I've got all the scriptures I need pulled up. But in Matthew chapter 22, and of course now my computer decides it wants to freeze up right when I need it. Matthew chapter 22, starting in verse 34. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." So, of course, and I think I might even talk about next week, and I want to talk about this idea. The first and greatest commandment of how love should show up in our lives is our relationship with God, how we love God. But today, what this class, or this shorter Devo type class is going to be about, is that loving your neighbor. We're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. And by loving God and loving our neighbors, we're told that all the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. A similar thing is said in Matthew 7. And to kind of illustrate of like, how are we supposed to love our neighbor, right? Because that's the question. It's easy to say, yeah, the fruit of the Spirit is love. And it's easy to say, yeah, love your neighbor as yourself. And I want to answer that question of what does loving your neighbor look like. I want to answer it in a broad sense, and then I want to answer it in like a specific sense. to kind of illustrate that. If somebody asks, like, well, what is music? You could say, well, music is any sort of melodic sounds, and you can answer just like anything that fits under this idea of melodic sounds could be music. But you could also be like, well, listen to the Eagles, this is music, or listen to the Beatles, this is music, or listen to, I don't know, what are people listening to? Imagine Dragons? I don't know if people are listening to Imagine Dragons anymore. This is music, and you can go to specific things and be like, this. You can illustrate music by talking about it in a broad sense, but you can also look at the specifics and say, listen to the song, this is music, listen to this is music. And that's kind of what we're doing with love here. I want to talk about the broad sense first. In Matthew 7, a very similar statement is made to the one that he says in Matthew 22. He says in verse 12, so in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. So this is a very similar statement. This sums up the law and the prophets. That's what he says in Matthew 7. And in Matthew 22, he says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So this idea of loving your neighbor as yourself, what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? I think that another way that Jesus describes this, even though it's in a different context, is just do to others as you would have them do to you. This is a big, important part of how are we going to love one another, is to answer, how would I want to be treated? And this is maybe cliche, but I think it's true. Now, this doesn't mean that love doesn't involve some tension or some conflict, or it's easy to say, well, I want to be treated nice all the time and I want everybody to agree with me, so then I have to go out and agree with everybody. That's not it, because we have to kind of ask ourselves what we really want. It might be nice for everybody to just treat us and pamper us and spoil us, but we don't actually want that, do we? I know that if I'm doing something wrong, I want people to call me out on it. Maybe not in the moment, but if I want to be better. So if I want to be better, I know I want people to challenge me. I want people to push me. We know that Jesus is always loving, and yet Jesus is not always what we would think of as, there's so many examples of Jesus being loving, caring, and compassionate, but we have the examples of Jesus just calling out the Pharisees and yelling at them and saying, woe to you, you guys just don't get it. And he's challenging them and he's pushing them. And that can be part of love too, because Hebrews 12 says that God disciplines those he loves. And we know that our parents discipline us. It's not always the most fun thing in the world to be disciplined, but that's them showing love to us because they want us to be good people. So all of that to say, but we can still wrap it up in this sense of, if we're being called out, how do we want to be called out? In any interaction we have with somebody, we should be willing to take a step back and say, how would I want to be treated in this interaction? If we need to challenge somebody out of love, we need to take a step back and say, how would I want to be challenged out of love? Excuse me. Sorry, guys. So the kind of broad example of what is love is doing to others as you would have them do to you. I want people to treat me with kindness. I want people to treat me with respect. I want people to challenge me when I'm doing wrong. But I want them to challenge me in kindness and respect. And so that's the overarching thing of like, how do I act loving towards this person? Take a step back and put yourself in their shoes and say, how would I want them to act loving towards me? So that's kind of the broad. In terms of specifics, what are specific ways that love shows up? I want to go to 1 Corinthians 13. Now, 1 Corinthians 13 is a completely different context. This is a discussion on spiritual gifts, And Paul is talking about how there's certain spiritual gifts that are better than other spiritual gifts, and that faith, hope, and love, these spiritual gifts are better than your more miraculous spiritual gifts of prophecy and those type of things. But there is a description of love in here that, while talking about how it's so much greater than these other gifts, it does illustrate to us how love, I think, works in the specific. So 1 Corinthians 13, starting in verse 4, it says, "Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud." And I could do a lesson on every single one of these, but it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So these are specific examples. It's just like, how do I be loving with somebody? Well, 1 Corinthians 13 says, be patient with them. How do I be loving to somebody? 1 Corinthians 13 says, be kind to them. Seek to not envy them. Seek to not boast over them. Now, it's interesting that all of these are in relationship. And once again, I think all of these are how we would want to be treated. I want people to be patient with me. It's so easy to get mad when somebody cuts you off in traffic or somebody cuts you in line. But I know when I make a mistake and I cut somebody off in traffic, I really hope they're patient with me. And we just need to flip that around. Every single time we're tempted to be impatient, put yourself in their shoes. Every single time we're tempted to be unkind, put yourself in their shoes and say, I would want them to treat me with kindness. We don't dishonor people. We're not self-seeking. We're not trying to put ourselves above them. We're not easily angered with people. Once again, it's so easy to get angry at somebody when they do something wrong to us, but when we do something wrong to them, we're like, can't you be patient with me? Can't you not get so angry with me? Keeping a record of wrongs. No, the important things about this list, I think, they are in relationship, because that's what love is. It's about how we treat people and how people treat us. And also, these are all actions out of humility. Every single one of these, it does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth, protects, trusts, hopes, perseveres, being patient, being kind. How you be patient with somebody, how you be kind with somebody is being willing to humble yourself and say, I'm going to think about this person like I would think about myself, or maybe even a little bit higher than myself. But these are specific examples. If you're looking in the broad example, you say, how would I treat them? Treat others as you want to be treated. If you're looking in the specific example and be like, I don't know how to love this person in front of me, look at 1 Corinthians 13. Be patient with them. Be kind to them. Try not to envy them. Try not to boast at them. Do not be proud at them. Do not dishonor them. These are specific things that you can practice. And I wanted to keep this around 15 minutes. It's at 13 minutes now. I know that these video classes are not the same thing as us being in class where we can interact and talk and joke and have a little bit more loose time. But to wrap it up, I'm going to give another quick summary, and then I want to end it with in John chapter 15.